remembrance of those that lost their lives in Las Vegas, those that are still healing, and the families that will forever be changed. Thank you.
I sincerely hope that all of you felt that video as I did. I have not been able to watch it one time. I've seen it several times. I have not been able to watch it without shedding tears, because we're still asking that question: where is the love? I want to just make mention of one announcement. For you to text questions, and we will have the screens up on the screens. We will have the number for you to text questions to for Dr. Cornel West a little bit later when he concludes and takes questions as we do Q&A. It's also super, super important to me because I was raised this way. When people do something kind for you, it is only right to say thank you.
Absolutely.
We have a group of people in this room who have made sure that you've had the right meals in front of you, that you've had water, that you've had the right dessert in front of you. And if you're like me, you probably moved desserts around because you didn't like the one that was in front of you. And they've made sure to make us comfortable and made sure that we felt welcome in this space. So I want you to put your fork and your knife down, and with a thunderous applause, thank all of our servers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. SMG, we thank you. Now I will turn it over to my more than capable colleague, Mr. Reggie Ivy.
All right. At this time, we would like to again thank all of our sponsors. We have a number of sponsors that have supported this event these last 2 days. But we have two platinum sponsors that we'd like to recognize right now. They are the Ann and Henry Zarrow Foundation and also the St. Francis Health System. Please join me in thanking them. We are fortunate to have representatives from the Zarrow family in the audience, or those who work with the foundation, and we would like to recognize them by name. We have Maxine Zarrow, Gail and Kip Richards, Eric Richards, Lisa Zarrow, Ken Avery, Bill Major, Courtney Knobloch, Emily Dukes, Sean Crisp, and Steve Cochran. Thank you so much. You're sitting right here, right in front. I have the pleasure and the honor, and I am thrilled and excited to introduce our closing keynote speaker. I just got an opportunity along with Carmen to sit with him, and he was as gracious as I thought he would be, even more so. But Dr. Cornel West, Dr. Cornel Ronald West, who was born right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we welcome you home, and brother, we need you. Thank you so much. He is an American philosopher, political activist, social critic, and author, known as one of America's most gifted, provocative, and important public intellectuals. He is the author of the contemporary classic, Race Matters, which changed the course of America's dialogue on race and justice, and the New York Times bestseller, Democracy Matters. He has held professorships at Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Union Theological Seminary, and the University of Paris. Dr. West, one of his most famous quotes is one that I would like to read for you. I feel as if I have been blessed to undergo a transformation from gangster to redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities.
Gangsta-ish.
That quote gives you a glimpse into the raw and unapologetic discourse you are about to hear. Drawing on his academic background in philosophy and theology, Dr. West highlights the legacy of civil rights leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to continue the conversation about justice and equity to our contemporary society. Please put your hands together for Dr. Cornel West. Thank you.
What a blessing to be here, Tulsa, Oklahoma Mental Health Association. Let's give it up for Sister Carmen and Brother Reggie. Give it up for both of them. I want to salute Executive Director, my dear Brother Michael. Where is Brother Michael, Executive Director? Stand up to brother. Let's give it up to this visionary leader here, Brother Michael Bros. I want to salute Sister Karen as well. Where's Sister Karen? There she is. Stand up, Sister Karen. Oh, this is a very, very special moment for me. I have not returned to Tulsa, Oklahoma since my Uncle Earl died. And I was here every summer. We would travel from Sacramento, California to Tulsa, Oklahoma. My grandfather was pastor for over 40 years of Metropolitan Baptist Church, still going strong. Still going very strong. Indeed, indeed. Dad grew up here, went to George Washington Carver, I think it was, and then on to Booker T. Washington High School. Oh, yes. Definitely. Now, in those days, it was chocolate all the way through and all the way down on the Jim Crow, but I'm told now it's the #1 high school in the state of Oklahoma. Very much so. I know within the high school they got the general population and then they got the honors program, so you always got that rich mix, and that's a magnificent mix as well. I want to acknowledge my dear brother here, though we had such a wonderful conversation. Your full name again is Brother Mark Davis. Give it up for Brother Mark Davis. Absolutely. And I was blessed to set eyes on one of the spiritual giants in Sacramento. We spent time here in Oklahoma going to university. He's Bishop Cornel Lovelace Jr. I don't know whether he's still here. Yes, he is. Oh, my God, what a blessing. What a giant he is. You know, I come from the same church, building on the same legacy, the same pastor, Reverend Willie P. Cook. In those days, we had more pastors and CEOs of churches. The market model hadn't set in such a way that it squeezed out that deep service to the vulnerable. Yeah, we had choirs, not praise teams. And oh, we had strong ministries to the elderly, strong ministries to the prisoners. That's where we come from. We are not just Christians, we are Cookites, because we build on Reverend Willie P. Cook. Give it up for Reverend Willie P. Cook in his absence. In his absence. And I say that because all that I have to present to you today is predicated on the notion that you all are the salt of the earth. Yes, you are. Now, I've read about my dear brother Clifford Whittingham Beers, Yale graduate, author of that classic, A Mind That Found Itself of 1908. And I read that text, and I was deeply moved by that text. In fact, many of you might recall it ends with a letter from one of my heroes, William James, the most adorable of all public philosophers, supporting the struggle of our precious and priceless, physically, mentally challenged, and for too long they have been in the margins, rendered invisible, going all the way back to Dorothy Dix through the witness of Beers up to this very moment in this organization. Give yourselves a hand keeping alive the vision of our dear brother Beers. That reading of Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. That says, oh, maybe if I put pen to paper, I'll be able to keep track of those whose humanity has been often overlooked and downplayed. I stand before you today, someone who acknowledges that I am who I am because somebody loved me. And that video that my dear sister Carmen acknowledged, where is the love? It reminds me of Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack. Where is the love? But also of Walter Hawkins. What is this inside of me that won't allow me to hold my peace? It's the love inside. And I was gifted, based on no merit of my own, to be born. Irene and Clifton West, it's the greatest honor I've ever had, far beyond teaching at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Union Theological Seminary and University of Paris. That was a lot of fun. I was able to bear witness, but I will never be able to come close. Oh, showing up in mama's womb right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Moton Hospital. Oh, yes. That's the same hospital where the Wilson brothers of the Gap Band were born. You all know what that Gap stands for, don't you? Greenwood, Archer, Pine, Black Wall Street, Black dignity, Black determination, Black prosperity. Oh, yes. And then the vicious massacre, the vicious attack. I was just talking to my two dear brothers. I consider them part of the spiritual nobility of Tulsa, the Goodwin men, 2 generations. Both of you raise your hand, raise your hand. There they're sitting right there at the table. The Goodwin brothers, my Goodwin brothers. The Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. What does it mean to wrestle with, mustering the courage to learn how to love? And I come from a people who, after 400 years of being terrorized and stigmatized and traumatized, 400 years of being hated, taught the world so much about love and so much about how to love. John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme" doesn't drop from the sky. It comes from a shaping and a family in a church. In his case, AME Zion. I just happen to be gut bucket, funky Holy Ghost Baptist, but I embrace my Zion, AME Zion brothers and sisters. Because we Baptists didn't produce a Coltrane. We produce Aretha, but not a Coltrane. Not bad, not bad. But this is serious business, because now that the whole nation has the blues, and the blues people were able to generate such deep resources to learn how to love and teach the world how to love, this blues nation either learns from those blues people or you're going to lose your democracy. Because the attempt of a hated people to love themselves and love others constitutes leaven in a democratic loaf. It's the very thing that allows us not just to expand economically and politically, but most importantly, allows us to mature morally and spiritually. I assume that we're living in a spiritual blackout. And a spiritual blackout is the relative eclipse of quest for integrity, honesty, decency, and courage. And in its place is survival of the smartest and the slickest. And it ends up with an obsession with the 11th commandment: thou shalt not get caught. And no democracy can survive based on such market-driven moralities, obsessed with short-term gain and superficial success rather than long-term vision and a conception of greatness that is rooted in a moral and spiritual mode of being in the world. And that's what the Mental Health Association represents. That's what you all enact. That's what you embody. It goes all the way back to Brother Beers. Based on experience of one's own, but also based on a deep sensitivity, a care, a concern for others. And I just happen to be part of a tradition at West Family and Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California, then off to Harvard and being shaped and molded by loving teachers like Israel Scheffler and John Rawls and Robert Nozick and Roderick Firth and Stanley Cavell, and on to Princeton with Sheldon Wolin and Richard Rorty. They were not just teachers in a narrow sense, they were carers and nurturers of not just mind but also soul. And we live in a moment of neoliberal soul craft that's hollow and shallow. It's obsessed with smartness, money, and bombs. And we see the blowback, the spiritual blowback in the souls of so many of our precious young people and ourselves. No social experiment can put a priority on being the smartest in the room as the message to its young people. I thank God that I was never told that the end and aim of life is being the smartest person in the room. I tell that to my students at Harvard, and they look at me like I've fallen from the sky. What do you mean, Brother West? Aren't the phones smart? I say, no, let the phones be smart. You be wise and courageous and sacrificial in serving those who are vulnerable. Don't believe the neoliberal hype. I was never told to be the richest person in the world materially and financially, and it's not because my family was broke of the 10 Commandments financially, though at times we were. But no, we were told in your short trek from mama's womb to tomb, you better learn how to bear witness. Sarah Ray used to tell us in Vacation Bible School, Brother Lovelace, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. You're going to leave the world better than you found it. You're going to leave the world with a little bit more love. And justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. And I come from a people, like our oldest Redness said, try a little tenderness. It's not say my name, say my name, say my name. You cannot talk about neoliberal soul craft, obsessed with smartness and money, and foreign policy, bombs. 26,155 bombs dropped in 2016, and that's under the liberal president. You can imagine what Trump has in mind. No. Tenderness, sweetness, gentleness, kindness. That's the raw stuff of a good life. But when you give up on the quest for integrity, life becomes solely a matter of cupidity, love of money, and venality, willing to sell yourself. And we live in a culture in which everything is for sale, everybody's for sale. What a message to our precious young people. Oh, as Wu-Tang Clan put it about 20 years ago, it's a cream condition. Cash rules everything around me, but it doesn't have to rule me. doesn't have. Yes, we need money. Yes, we need cash. But oh, the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used to say, show me a culture that views life as a gold rush, and I'll show you a culture that worships the golden calf, or conceives of the golden rule as he or she who has the gold makes the rule. Empty, hollow, shallow, vacuous. I want to thank the Zarrow family for having the vision to sustain this kind of institution. Give it up for them. Give it up for them. We thank you so very much. Because you can't talk about the history of the Mental Health Association and the legacy of Beers and others without deep Socratic sensibility. That echo line 38A of Plato's Apology, the unexamined life is not worth living. And then Malcolm X adds, the examined life is painful. What kind of courage is required for us to be honest and candid with ourselves? And we begin with ourselves. No finger pointing and name calling. Now, it's true that I've said a number of things about my dear brother Donald Trump. I've called him a gangster. And I think that's an objective condition, not a subjective expression. If you're grabbing women's parts, that's gangster. Going to get somebody else's oil that's not yours, that's gangster. But as I said before, and as my brother noted, I'm dealing with the gangster inside of me. I'm not just pointing my finger at him. Donald Trump didn't drop from the sky. He is as American as cherry pie. There's a long history of mediocre white brothers in high places. Oh, yeah. There's a long history of misogyny and looking at women solely as objects of sexual conquest to be dominated for instant gratification. There's a long history of talking about our precious Mexican and other Latino immigrants. There's a long history of losing sight to our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and bisexuals and precious trans folk. There's a long history of white supremacy, and white supremacy says what? Black love is a crime. Black freedom is a pipe dream. Black history is a curse, and black hope is a joke. It's been the message pounded in, bombarding black people since the first slave stepped off the slave ship and headed toward the slave auction. But in the face of such bombardment, wrestling with the quest for sanity, wrestling with the quest for dignity and decency, the black folk could steal away at night and hold hands because they couldn't worship God without white supervision. They couldn't learn how to read and write, so you're not going to get a black Shakespeare or a black Milton under such conditions. But lo and behold, you're still going to have black genius when they lifted their voices, already prefiguring the anthem of a black people. Lift every voice. And when they lifted their voices, they sang some songs about swing low, sweet chariot. They sang some songs about nobody knows the trouble I've seen, nobody knows but Jesus. They sang songs that transfigured their suffering in such a way that they didn't want to terrorize others even as they were terrorized. They didn't want to traumatize others even as they were traumatized. They didn't want to stigmatize others even as they were stigmatized. And here comes Martin Luther King Jr., and here comes James Baldwin. Here comes John Coltrane's Love Supreme. Here comes that grand figure on the American stage called Mama in a Raisin in the Sun, written by a genius from the south side of Chicago named Lorraine Hansberry. There's never been a figure full of so much love on the American stage as Mama in that play. What is it about these Negroes? What is it about these black people? What is it about these New World Africans that could be bombarded with that kind of terrorism and refuse to opt for a black version of the Ku Klux Klan? refuse to opt for a black version of ISIS, refuse to opt for a black version of Al-Qaeda, you would think after 400 years of being terrorized, lo and behold, black folk would give up on love. Give up on it. I'm told that all the time in the younger generation. Brother West, you old school. You tied to Martin Luther King Jr. You tied to Curtis Mayfield. You tied to Donny Hathaway. I said, that's right. You got the right, black man. We tired of that stuff. That's outdated. I said, what you gonna try then, my young brother? And I'm loving the way I'm gonna critique you. What are you gonna try? We want power. We want domination because we've been dominated. I say you're going to slap your grandmama in the face in the grave. All of that love she sacrificed for you. All of that example that she provided for you. It's better to be defeated momentarily with your integrity than win and be a gangster. Oh, yes. This is a spiritual battle. It's a moral battle that has political consequences. Yes, it's about wealth inequality. Yes, it's about Jim Crow Jr. We broke the back of Jim Crow Sr., didn't we? Jim Crow Jr. is still in place. Where we live, churches we go to, friends that we have, bubbles that we live in, silos we inhabit, still Jim Crow oriented. And then we got our dear sister Michelle Alexander who talks about the new Jim Crow. Just look at the prison system. And just look at the juxtaposition, all the crimes committed on Wall Street in 2008, insider trading, market manipulation, predatory lending, fraudulent activities. How many Wall Street executives went to jail? Zero. Let Jamal and Letitia get caught with a crack bag. Let Juanita and Carlos get caught. Let a poor white brother and sister get caught. Let an indigenous brother and sister get caught. Off to jail. Criminal justice system leans against the vulnerable and protects the powerful. No democracy can survive given that kind of arbitrary rule of law. But I don't begin there. I don't begin a dialogue of injustice and discrimination with public policy. I begin with soul craft. What kind of human beings are we going to choose to be, and what kind of example will we attempt to be as we make our move toward the worms? That's the question. And every person has to answer that within the inner precincts of their own soul. And it's not a matter of skin pigmentation, gender, sexual orientation, national identity. Yes, those things are real, but in the end, it's a profoundly human question. And there's no accident that our English word human derives from the Latin humando, which means burial and burying. And what will they say at your funeral? They're not going to read your resume. They're going to talk about your character. They're going to talk about what cost you were willing to pay. They're going to talk about what kinds of risks did you take. They're going to talk about how deep is your love. We thank the Bee Gees for that question. Australia's contribution. No, I'm just kidding. Where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us in a moment of spiritual blackout in which we have normalized mendacity. We have made lies the normal order of things. And we have naturalized criminality. We have made certain crimes part of the natural order of things. We know that this land itself was stolen from indigenous peoples. That's a crime. We know slavery was a fundamental pillar of the nation. That was a crime. We know that women have been viciously, psychically, and physically attacked in private spaces. Insecure male egos. Those are crimes against humanity. We know that our mentally challenged and physically challenged brothers and sisters have been pushed so far to the margins that it's hard for them to get a foothold in the public imagination and public conversation. That's a crime against humanity too. And Malcolm X is right. Malcolm X is right. And sooner or later, the chickens are going to come home to roost. You're going to reap what you sow. Sooner or later, what is repressed will return. And that blowback will affect heart, mind, soul, church, mosque, synagogue, trade union, civic institutions, government. And there's a sense in which we are experiencing an imperial meltdown. What do you mean by that, Brother West? Well, America's not just a fragile and precious democratic experiment, it's also an empire. 4,855 military units around the world, 587 of them in 42 countries, special operations in 150 countries, only 192 countries in the world. Our military budget's bigger than the next 6 countries combined. 53 cents for every dollar goes to the military-industrial complex. That's one of the reasons why we always say, money for schools, oh, we can't find it. Money for health care, we can't find it. Money for decent housing, we can't find it. Money for jobs with a decent wage, we can't find it. But just go to war. Lo and behold, we find as much money as we need. Why? Because we have an empire to protect. When you have military overreach on the one hand and corruption and political elites and financial elites on the other, and then you have spiritual blackout in the hearts and minds and souls of folk, the fundamental response is addictive personalities, self-medication, escape from overwhelming pain, feeling so helpless and impotent and hopeless. And it is expanding. It's black, white, red, yellow, across the board. And thank God you all are in the vanguard. You already were concerned about the precious mentally challenged when it was highly unpopular. And if you can generate that kind of empathy and sensitivity, it's no accident that you can also have empathy and sensitivity to other slices of humanity who are undergoing suffering and social misery. You already have what it takes for a soul craft that is counter to the neoliberal soul craft. Instead of smartness, you're talking about wisdom, courage, and compassion. Instead of just money, you're talking about equality or egalitarian sensibilities that ensure with all the money that we don't have 22% of our children living in poverty, or 1 out of 2 children under 6 living in poverty in the richest nation in the history of the world that is morally obscene and spiritually empty. Where are the voices? Where's the righteous indignation? Where's the moral outrage? Where are the churches? There was once a time in which you could depend on the prophetic churches to step out. But so many of the churches have become commodified, corporatized, so obsessed with reproducing their own institutions, they forget about the sacrificial dimension of what it means to be a Christian. We used to have more prophetic synagogues that would take seriously Amos and Isaiah, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Where do we have those strong Jewish voices? Where are the mosques and the Muslims? Where are the Buddhists? I'm not saying we don't have. We got a whole host of them in this room. I mean, there's a sense in which what I'm saying only applies to some of y'all. You know what I mean? I know we got some saints up in here. But remember, a saint ain't nothing but a sinner who looks at the world through the lens of the heart. Who looks at the world through the lens of the heart. And what what we've got to do is by our example, individual, collective, institutional, and even in social movements on the street, by example, send to our fellow citizens and fellow human beings, there is an alternative. There's another way of being in the world, and that alternative and other way of being in the world may appear as if we are losers, because those who opt for compassion in our society are often viewed as losers. Oh, you still into that 1960 stuff concerned about justice, huh? You haven't got over that yet. Oh, I see. You'll grow up one day. You say, no, I'm stuck on it. Going to be faithful unto death on it, because it's not a lifestyle. And more importantly than that, it's a cause, not a brand. It's a cause, it's not a brand. It's something you're willing to live and die for. And I've experienced this in my years in prison teaching. I've taught in prisons for 37 years. That magnificent times with the brothers. One of the things that they are fundamentally concerned about, they look in your eyes and they say, just like those who you all work with look in your eyes and say, are you as committed to justice as I was committed to the gangster life that got me in here? That's a serious question. I asked the brother, well, how committed were you though, brother? I killed somebody. Oh, okay. I guess you were highly committed, but let me tell you something. I'm a love warrior. I'm in warfare. It's not militaristic. It's moral and it's spiritual. And I'm not a summer soldier. I'm not a sunshine soldier. I'm an all-season love warrior. I'm going to linger with those catching hell. I'm going to be with them when they way down. I'm going to be with them when they way up. I'm going to be with them when they're in the middle. How come? Because it's a choice that has to do with the kind of human being I attempt to be as I live and die. That's the kind of spiritual and moral awakening that is required if we have any chance at all of turning around the spiritual blackout and the imperial meltdown. There's going to be examples. Young folk, they don't want to hear sermons. They want to see sermons. They want to see them. They want to be able to touch it. They want to make it tangible. They want to know who's going to be there day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out. They want to know, are you going to be in the wonderful category of our magnificent sister Jane Austen in her novels, constancy? It's a beautiful word. Constancy. Are you going to have longevity in your integrity? Are you going to have longevity in your honesty? Are you going to have longevity in your decency? Are you going to have longevity in your generosity so people can see it's not a strategy or a tactic. It's fundamentally who you are as a human being. That's what this association is all about. That's what you all have been able to enact at your best. And that is no small feat in the culture and civilization, empire, and democratic experiment in which we find ourselves today. And I should add a rich footnote. You're doing it in Oklahoma. Oh, yeah. Now, I'm proud to be from Oklahoma. I only stayed here a few weeks, but I'm proud to be here. We made our way to Topeka, Kansas, made our way to California, came back every summer, and I tell the world, yes, I'm from Oklahoma. I just stayed a few weeks. They had a fire 3 days after I was born in the hospital, but I'm glad to be from Oklahoma. But I also am aware that after that attempt to make Oklahoma an all-black and all-red state, and when the oil interests came in, and when some of my right-wing evangelical Christian brothers and sisters came in, made it very difficult for the prophetic elements to surface. And now I'm in Oklahoma. If I were to go to the State House and give this speech, It would be a fascinating dynamic, wouldn't it? I tell them, I say, oh, I love you Republicans, but I got something to say to you. Love always cuts deeper than politics. But love is not sadomasochistic either. Because when you really love the least of these, you hate the fact they're being treated unjustly, and you loathe the fact they're being treated unfairly. And if you don't say something, the rocks are going to cry out. That's what this association is all about. And I'm so blessed that you've allowed me to come to say a few words. And I look forward to our dialogue together. But I want to end on a blue note. I started talking about the blues, and I want to end on the blues. Because the blues begins with the very thing that most of America denies. The blues begins with catastrophe. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be jiving too. That's the king of the blues right there. That's the B-side of the Thrill Is Gone. B.B. King, genius born in Mississippi. Good Morning Heartache, the great Billie Holiday from Baltimore City. That's catastrophic. Unable to get up in the morning, wrestling with suicide, that's existential catastrophe. That's where the blues starts. And part of the genius of black people in this nation is that in the face of multi-layered forms of catastrophe, taught to hate ourselves, told we have the wrong hips and lips and noses and hair texture, we're still generating love, compassion, empathy, very much like Emmett Till's mother when she had to speak with her baby right there in Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ on the west side of Chicago. Her only baby, Mama Till, what you got to say to the world with your child in the coffin, keeping that coffin open so the whole world could see the catastrophic underside of America, killed in Mississippi, body dropped in the Tallahatchie River, fetch that body back, put it in the coffin, all of the cameras from all around the world, and what does she say? I don't have a minute to hate. I will pursue justice for the rest of my life. That is a level of soul craft, of deep spiritual and moral shaping and formation that goes back to the best of each and every one of us. She wasn't speaking just on behalf of black people. She wasn't speaking just on behalf of America. She was speaking on the best of the human spirit. That's the best that the species has to offer. That's what we need. Thank God for what you're doing. Look forward to the question.
Dr. West is the embodiment of courageous justice. I've been speaking about it for the last couple of days, and it's not just a cause. I would add another C. It's a call. He could not do this unless he was called to stand before us in such a powerful way and talk about justice in ways and maybe in which you may not have heard before. But speak about it in ways that stirs you up. And Reggie and I have been talking about it in the last couple of days. It's not just to stir you up, to just get you excited. And this is not to seed into ourselves, but it's also about taking what you've heard, paying attention to it, and then taking action. Not sitting in your seats and being silent. So we want to take a few questions, and I'm asking questions. I know yesterday I said no pontificating, and I really did mean that. But if you have a question, you can text them. We've given you the instructions on how to text the questions, but the mics are open. They're hot right now. If you have a burning question, I see a lady right here. Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a burning question. As Native people, sometimes we pick out, like someone like me, that's mixed blood, to change themselves so that we can go amongst people and see what's really being said. And the thing that pains me and what I want to know is, see, we do have to be strategic. We do have to be strategists, and we do need money to get things done. What do we do when I can't invite and can't afford the rest of my family, the rest of my clan, the rest of my people to join me at a dinner like this, to hear what's being said? How do we do it? How do we love without the tools that we need to love?
Yes, thank you so very much, and salute the work that you're doing. You can stay right there, sister, so we can just look at it. There you go. Absolutely. No, it's eye to eye, soul to soul, person to person. No, indeed, indeed. Well, one is that we have to be multi-contextual. Sometimes being multi-contextual is much more important than multicultural. We have to be able to move from a variety of different contexts, because there's some wonderful things being said in a variety of different contexts that your precious folk have access to, as opposed to this. We don't have all the good stuff in this room. There's a whole lot of good stuff in a whole lot of other contexts that other people also have access to. And then good stuff taking place in this room, it can be made available. I think they got a tape though, right? You're making a tape of this thing? I see some lights on. You make it available so they get a chance to see it, talk about it, and so forth and so on.
And may I say one other
Sure.
thing? How do we do things like, as natives, economic development? We do at times compromise our morals by starting casinos, which casinos, if you've ever walked in one, there's smoking, there's drunkenness, there's people gambling away their mortgages. But we have reservations with kids, no water, not even a toilet to use, using a bucket still. And you talked about this in your speech.
Yes.
You said we can't compromise our morals, but sometimes we have to do what we can we have to do the best that we
Yes.
can with what we got.
No, I do understand. I mean, you bring power and pressure to bear on government, business, as well as yourself for as much economic development as possible. Then you look at what William James called the live options. What options are available to you that are credible, realizable, and actualizable? And there's a difference, though, between prudence and opportunism. Prudence has to do with practical wisdom. You're making a practical judgment still tied to your vision, but your vision can never be fully realized unless you make certain kinds of prudential decisions. Now, opportunism is one in which there's simply no ideals, no principles whatsoever. And that, for me, is non-negotiable. When I talk about selling your soul for a mess of pottage, that's opportunist. When I talk about having to compromise in order to feed your kids, that's prudential. You see the difference I'm making?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Dr. West, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, indeed.
I just want to remind you that when you are asking your questions, would you please state your name and what city you're from? I'm going to read a question that came through by text. Dr. West, what is the one thing citizens can do to make America great again?
Wow. I don't think there's just one thing, though, you see. It really, part of what I was trying to convey was that we're all very singular, irreproducible people, just like our fingerprints and our voices. There's never be another person like us in the history of the cosmos. So you have certain unique gifts that you can do. Give those gifts in such a way that in a spirit of humility and self-critical sensibility, not self-righteousness, you are trying to make the world better. And by making it better, I mean spreading the integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, empathy to the best of your ability relative to the time and space in which you find yourself. Now, that's abstract because everybody got different gifts. See, I could have chosen to be a jazz musician and I would be broke, missed my call, but had a good time. So it's relative to your gifts. My dear brother Bishop Lovelace here, he coincides his calling and his gifts, and he ends up bearing witness in such a way that has unbelievable repercussions. It's a coincidence and that coincidence is a matter of you knowing yourself well enough that you know what gifts you have, willing to cultivate those gifts and give those gifts. That's the key. Now, what they are, that's up to you. That's up to you. That's a non-answer, though, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Brother West.
How you doing, my brother?
I'm Tim Deerhammer, and I'm from Tulsa. I'm MSW student at OU. But I also want to say, I also was a pastor, and I am becoming a social worker because of the corruption of my denomination to forget the prophetic voice and to move. Like you said, the sermons need to be seen.
Yes.
But one of the things that I wanted you to share with us, because to me it moves me deeply, is you are not only an amazing oral communicator, but you actually communicate justice with your clothes. And I was hoping you could explain the symbolism of the scarf around your neck for those who don't know.
Oh, you mean my sartorial practice?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Because to me, when I learned that about you, I was like, I don't even have words to say how much I appreciate the depth of thought you have to justice and even symbolism about that.
Well, brother, I appreciate those words, though. But I do want to be clear that, the great Samuel Beckett used to say, try again, fail better. Try again, fail better. That's the story of my life. You see, my life is a relative failure because all of us fall short. I know what the standards are, and I'll fall far short, but I keep trying. I keep swinging like Ella Fitzgerald, Muhammad Ali, in the name of love. And it's true that when Martin Luther King Jr. told the young folk in Birmingham to put on their good clothes, because those good clothes were cemetery clothes. They got to be coffin ready, given their commitment to love and justice. So every morning I put on my cemetery clothes. I'm coffin ready. I go with a smile on my face and maybe a little style if I can work it out. You know what I mean? And the scarf has to do with trying to preserve the voice. I learned that from Luther Vandross and a host of the other great artists. For me, musicians are the vanguard of the species, just like I think artists are the vanguard of the species. They are the ones who give it all, what you call soulful kenosis, a self-emptying that gives to other people gifts that enable and empower other people even as they leave themselves empty. Like Jesus on the cross, giving it all. Take all the love. Take it. You're going to need it. It's a cold, cruel world. Do what you can with it, but I've given you every drop, every fiber that I have. It's like James Brown at the end of a concert. He'd go 4 hours killing himself. And he would always say, I'm an extension of you and you're an extension of me. I do not exist without you. Did anybody come here to hear a song and we didn't play? And the sister in the back holler, you didn't play Soul Power. And he say, hit it, Bootsy. Why? He came to serve. He didn't come for spectacle, just spectacle. Very different these days. It's spectacle with very little substance. It's no accident we don't have young, magnificent black groups that sing in harmony and in tune like the Delphonics and the Dramatics and the Whispers and the Main Ingredient and the Temptations and the Miracles and the Jones Girls and the Emotions and so forth. We got the oligarchs who run a recording industry. They just want one person with a microphone. Because you don't get that sense of the tenderness and the discipline and the sweetness and the mastery of craft and the hitting the notes right. You got folks who can't sing in tune and make $1 million. So
true.
And Carmen McRae and Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and even Doris Day cry in their grave. They hit the notes right. And we ain't got the Beethoven, the Mozart yet. We haven't got the Horowitz yet. We haven't got the Art Tatum yet. They hit the notes right. It's called arate. It's excellence. What happens when excellence collapses? And it's money. Oh, I see. So Curtis Mayfield never won a Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. That says it all right there. Go right ahead, though, brother.
Hold on, Nehemiah. We have a question.
sorry.
That's okay, Dr. West. Let me read this question. How have your views changed about civil rights in the era of Black Lives Matter?
Oh, no, they haven't changed at all. I mean, I'm trying to listen. And of course, I work very closely with my young brothers and sisters in Black Lives Matter. I just want to make sure that they know that the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and others set the standard.
Yes.
Set the standard. It's not a matter of the passage of time. It's not a matter of the passage. Don't fall for the notion that there's a rightness in the latest. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's better. Not at all. Not at all. But it also means those of us who are old school, that we got to learn and listen from the young brothers and sisters because they have something to teach us because they're living under circumstances we know not of. When we grew up, Brother Lovelace and I, and I'm older than Brother Lovelace, when we grew up in the ghetto. We didn't grow up in the hood. When Donny Hathaway sang about the ghetto, he was singing about bonds of empathy and sympathy. He was talking about heroic action. He was talking about those who had vision. The hood is survival of the slickest. Guns, drugs, money, domination, echoes of high places. Wall Street, domination, money, sexual exploitation, prostitute. We can go on and on and on. So it becomes a thoroughly American affair in that way. And so when I spend time with my marvelous brothers and sisters in Black Lives Matter, I come in with love. And love you respect, protect, and correct. I'm going to protect you when you're viciously attacked and wrongly attacked. I'm going to respect you as human beings. I'm going to correct you if I don't see enough love, no matter what. And I had the same challenge with Obama. You got to protect him against Fox News. You got to correct him when he's too close to Wall Street, when he's dropping drone strikes and killing innocent folk in Yemen and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Somalia and other places. And you got to correct him when it comes to the security surveillance state that keeps track. But you also respect him. He's brilliant, he's poised, and of course he looks better and better given Donald Trump. But don't lose sight. Don't lose sight of the constancy of the need to critique both in the name of something bigger of both, bigger than us, bigger than each one of us. Go ahead.
Nehemiah.
Yes, my name is Nehemiah Frank, and I'm from North Tulsa. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for coming home, and also I wanted to say thank you for working with young people and grabbing them and teaching them the ways, teaching them how to be disciplined, teaching them what to walk out for, because it's important. I see a lot of leaders forget about us often, but in this city, I would say Representative Regina Goodwin and my wonderful city councilor, I am because of them. The only reason why I've reached the amount of success that I've reached already is because of them. So thank you. I hope that other people that are in this room grab a young person and mentors them.
Thank you, my brother. That's very kind. Appreciate it. And I know that you were talking about Sister Vanessa. Is that right? Where is she? Yeah, there she is. Give it up for our dear sister. And who was the other one? My brother? Who was the other one? Stan.
Regina Goodwin.
Oh, there. Give it up for our dear sister over here. Good to see you. I just want to make sure the people know who they are. Go right ahead.
We're getting close to the end of our time, so these are going to be the last two questions. Is it Kenya? Kyla. Go ahead, Kyla.
Hi, my name is Kyla Sloan, and I'm a student at the University of Tulsa, but I'm from New Orleans. And yesterday, Dr. Sue from Columbia University spoke about microaggressions and how exhausting the constant experience of experiencing those microaggressions are. What strategies and advice would you give to young people of color in my generation to move forward to pursue justice and show love in a productive way that doesn't entirely burn them out?
Well, first I salute the work that you're doing at the University of Tulsa. That's a grand institution. My dear brother John used to teach there many years ago. When it comes to microaggressions, I mean, given from my own personal experience, I've had so many of them, and they come my way so intensely that I tried to prioritize other things. You know what I mean? I mean, when you come into a philosophy department, philosophy class, and they say, this class is for rational beings only. Then they look at me like I don't belong. I'm thinking, talking about you, John. No, they're talking about you, Brother West. So what did I do? Well, he said, well, who wants to give the first class report? I put my hand up right away. Waved at him. Then when I came back the next week, it was like John Coltrane on his saxophone. I'd done so much homework, undergone the rereading and what have you. When I gave my presentation, the professor said, that was very rational of you. Very sharp of you. Not to prove anything to him, but to just be true to my mama. Just to be true to my father, you see, which is not to use others as my point of reference, but to be the best that I can be. And if they are so petty that they still trashing me and devaluing me, they gonna learn something by hanging out with me.
Yes.
See what I mean?
Yes.
But then I keep moving. And there's a possibility, they end up coming around. Oh, it'd be nice to have lunch, maybe somewhere down there. Oh, yeah, let's break bread. It'd be on me, too. Let's break bread. Yeah, that's right. But I'm not saying it happens in every case. But you want to keep your priorities broader. The last thing you want to do is become fixated on insecure, mediocre folk who are trying to put you down. That's right. The last thing you want to do. Don't become fixated on it. That's the last thing. And it's just like in America, the last thing we need to do is fetishize Brother Donald Trump. Like give him all these magical powers. No, not at all. He is a sign and a symptom of something so much deeper. We've got to get at the sources of that which is deep, even as we keep track of his mess on the top. But you don't fetishize it. No, not at all. No, not at all. If my ancestors had fetishized the slave holders, a lot of us black folk wouldn't be in this room.
So true.
They had their eyes on something higher, broader, deeper, higher spiritual excellence, moral content, willingness to transcend even as they engage. Not escape now, but transcend, to work through it. That's the key. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. You stay strong in your work.
Before you do your question, I have a couple from texts that have been texted through. Let me find it. What hope or perspective do you have to offer to the millions of children of incarcerated parents?
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy. That's very, very heavy. I think the first thing we need to do is we always go to the voices of both the children and the parents of those who are undergoing that experience. Because their strength, their determination, their tenacity, their fortitude become examples grounded in the experience. I mean, I could pontificate, you know what I mean? But that's not my experience.
Right.
I can learn and listen and be inspired and make sure they have a platform, a stage, as it were, you see. So the first thing is trying to make those voices available to large groups of people. Large groups of people, you see. It's one thing to talk about, this is what I would say at the funeral of my loved one. It's another thing to listen to Mama Teal. Because she was there. She'd been through that bleakness and that darkness. And look how she came out. You see. And that's what I think we find similar kind of voices of those children and parents of those children dealing with the new Jim Crow, dealing with the hyper-incarceration that we've experienced in this nation in the last 30, 35 years or so.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, and then you, Mr. Goodwin.
We'll end with Brother. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for being here. So my question is on how do you suggest that we come together as one and support each other, right? Because we have these different situations that come up that alert a certain community. say when, we talk about a Muslim ban, then it affects the Muslim community, or we talk about Black Lives Matter, or we talk about a wall coming up. And so all of these things affect people. And until it hits our neighborhood, our home, then it's like it doesn't really affect us. So how do you suggest that we come together as an intracultural alliance to really support the overall good?
No, I appreciate the question. Now, one is that when I talked about that constancy, that moral, spiritual consistency, that has a result in a solidarity in which people show up. People are there. When we all went to Standing Rock, we wanted our indigenous brothers and sisters to know you are loved. When we go to Ferguson, we want the black folks to know you are loved. We go to Appalachia, the poor white, we are loved. When you're dealing with the mentally challenged, legislation, mobilization, person to person, we have to show up. We have to be there and show that it goes far beyond just the skin pigmentation or gender or sexual orientation. It's a moral and spiritual commitment. And when you have that, I think you begin to create the bonds of trust that are required for the kind of coalitions that we need if we're going to end up talking about the change of society in any larger sense. There will never be any coalitions of any worth if you don't have deep bonds of trust that have been forged in the context of struggle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much.
Before you go, Mr. Goodwin, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we go until 2 o'clock, so please continue to text your questions. My bad on that. But Mr. Goodwin, you're on.
Dr. West, Jim Goodwin. The last year.
Ooh, speak right into that technology, my brother.
Hello. Okay.
There you go.
Jim Goodwin here. Last year, Dr. Dart of the Tulsa Health Department announced that racism is a public health issue. I'd like your comments on that, please.
No, indeed, you mentioned that before. You know, the great E. Franklin Frazier wrote an essay in 1928 saying racism was a mental disease. He got run out of Atlanta. When he wrote that, he was a professor at Atlanta University, put a bounty on his head. So much for academic ivory tower activity. He got in deep trouble. Now, I'm told you said that here in Tulsa, there has been a declaration and proclamation, right? Absolutely, and I think that's very important in terms of not just casting a spotlight on racism, but showing it as the spiritual deficit, moral deficit, and the mentally challenged reality that it is. And if it cuts that deep, it means that our response must be very deep. Now, of course, the twist is this. The twist is that white supremacy, which has been so ubiquitous in the history of this nation and other parts of the world, but especially this nation, South Africa as well, it's in the souls of black people as well as in the souls of others. When I have white brothers and sisters come up to me, Brother West, I've transcended that racism. My parents have problems, but I knocked it out. And I say, I've been a black man in America for 64 years. When I look at my soul, I still see white supremacy. If I see white supremacy in you, my hunch is you still got some work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning what? Meaning that it's not a matter of dealing with racism as if it's over here somewhere or in somebody else. It is shot through, across the board. And it is, as James Baldwin says in his essay, The Fire Next Time, that wonderful essay to his nephew, but how do you refuse to be an Nigger? Because an Niggerization, niggerization, is a thoroughly American phenomenon. To take a people and transform them into those who hate themselves, devalue themselves, told they're less beautiful, less moral, less intelligent. The movies, the religious institutions, the universities, the educations, and then to make sure that they are forever afraid, intimidated, and scared, laughing when it ain't funny, scratching when it don't itch, always wearing the mask in order to feel as if that's the only way you can make it through life. Such a people will always be well adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference. And the question becomes, how do you deniggerize a people? What we learned in Shiloh is Jesus deniggerizes. He's in the deniggerizing business. If God loves you, then so what if other white folk are hating you? They're not the ultimate authority. You don't have to be a nigger. Straighten up and be a human being made in the image of God and get moving and get on the love train. That's deniggerization. The black Muslims always had on the cover of their newspaper, Islam dignifies, Islam deniggerizes. That's how Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. Now, he was wrong when he said white brothers and sisters were devils, but that was his way of trying to keep track of devilish behavior on the vanilla side of town. Nothing wrong with keeping track of devilish behavior. All of us have it. All of us have the proclivities, you see. But how do you? Well, that's true for everybody. That's true for the physically challenged. It's true for gays and lesbians and trans. It's true for women. It's true for workers. It's true for everybody. You need dignity. You need some way in which you have some sense of worth on your way to the extinction of your body. That's a human thing. It's a profoundly human thing, you see. And so in that sense, I think that we've got much to learn from how we wrestle with that issue. I'm sorry to go on so long, though.
I have a question.
Oh, absolutely.
So I told someone I grew up kind of like a PK. My great-grandfather.
Preacher's kid.
For all of you who don't know. My great-grandfather was the pastor of our church, our Baptist church. I just want you to know. Come on now.
Oh, Lord, what's the name of it?
Down in my soul.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
Mount Sinai Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist Church.
All right.
So here's my question. How do we raise, and also as a minister, how do we raise the prophetic voice again inside of the walls of our churches who are more interested in protecting their brands than they are building the people in the communities that come inside of those walls?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the great H. Richard Niebuhr used to say, a great towering, probably the finest theological mind in the middle part of the 20th century, taught at Yale for 42 years. He used to say, Christians must always remember that the church itself is founded on the bones of Peter, and Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So you're always going to have imperfection. Always going to fall short. Somebody so close to Jesus got cowardly, scared, afraid. No, I don't know him. No, me? When you hang around with him, no, that wasn't me. Looked like me. Probably my cousin. That wasn't me. That's the foundation of the church. But within that imperfection, you still have access to a love flow. Blood at a cross. That cross signifying unarmed truth. The condition of truth is allowed suffering to speak an unconditional love. And through that imperfect institution, you still have access to some power, freedom, and a love if you work hard enough and if you are fortunate enough to be able to discern it and be a part of it. And that's what we encountered at Shiloh. Shiloh wasn't perfect. Reverend Cook wasn't perfect. Deacon Hinton wasn't perfect. Mr. Lovelace Sr., Brother Lovelace Sr., head of the Sunday school, superintendent of Sunday school, the father of Brother Lovelace here, my father, trustee. These are cracked vessels just like me, just like Brother Cornel. Is that right, though, brother? I'm telling the truth. But we had access to examples. That's what we need today. Now, granted, we're at a lower moment, but in the low moment, you need your examples even more. But institutions go up, they go down, they peak, they get back to the medium, they go down, they bounce back. They're dynamic. They're forever changing. I'm sure somebody write the history of this grand institution. There's been some peak moments and there's been some nadir moments. Is that right, Brother Mike? Absolutely. But you in a bounce back mood now. That's what's magnificent.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Lauren Garter. I'm from Oklahoma City. And Dr. West, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on reparations never being paid for slavery, and how might those be paid now, either systemically or person to person?
Well, I appreciate the question. I mean, one, of course, You talk about reparations means you have to be honest about your past. You have to be willing for the truth to no longer be buried in the grave, but for it to be resurrected so people can really see the ways in which slavery shaped the economic prosperity of the nation. But 50% of the economy tied to the selling of black bodies. More wealth than even the railroads and so forth of the 1850s prior to the Civil War. We don't like to be confronted in that way. As you know, there's tremendous movement afoot now at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton and so forth. All that slave money that served as fundamental pillars for their institutions and for their establishment and what have you. We need to first find out the truth. Find out the truth. The great Rabbi Kutzker in the Judaic tradition always talked about the truth in the grave. We need excavation. America needs massive excavation just to find out what the truth is. Then when you find out what the truth is, you have a public conversation about what are you going to do about it. Damage done, what kind of repairs? Well, that's an open question. But what first step is, just be honest. Just be honest. You know, in Charlottesville, when we were there in Charlottesville, we simply said, look, let's be candid about what the truth is. These white brothers who were willing to give their lives, they were courageous, but they were tied to a gangster, thuggish cause of ensuring that black people would be in slavery in perpetuity. Now, who would argue if a black person stood up and said, I think there ought to be black people all around the country who have statues because they were fighting, willing to give their lives so that white brothers and sisters would be slaves in perpetuity? Wouldn't be a mass movement, would it? No, but when it's the other way around, oh, you got to understand, you know, that was our culture. Yeah, we had some blind spots here or there, but we're working it out now, but we're sorry about those 90 years of enslavement and 26 years of each. Please, let's be consistent. Consistent. It's a moral and spiritual question. Black supremacy is evil as white supremacy. We just haven't had black supremacist institutions enslaving black folk and lynching white folk. And if that were the case, my speech would be exactly the same. I would just be coming down on Negroes. Because it's a moral and spiritual issue. It's wrong. It's unjust. It's immoral. Across the board. You see what I mean? We have the same challenge with our Jewish brothers and sisters today in the Middle East. There was a Palestinian occupation of Jewish brothers and sisters. We ought to have a massive movement to make sure that our precious Jewish brothers and sisters who've been trashed for 2,000 years don't live under occupation. But with the Israeli occupation of Palestinians, people reluctant. Not me. In the name of a Jewish brother named Amos, in the name of a Jewish brother named Isaiah, occupations are wrong, immoral, and need to be changed and transformed. It's a moral and a spiritual issue, and you do it in such a way that you're not putting down our precious Jewish brothers and sisters. You are accenting the best of their own tradition. See what I mean? So it is with reparations. What kind of conversation once we confront the truth? Whoa, we got a long way to go for that. But I appreciate your question.
Thank you.
We have one question from a text as soon as my phone would like to work. In the wake of anthem protests, Dr. West, what is the appropriate form of bringing attention to the issue?
Oh, yeah, I think the anthem protest is just one particular form. For me, the crucial thing is keeping the love in it. See, my father actually fought in the U.S. Army, fought in the Jim Crow Army. My mother flies the flag every July 4th for him and what he was fighting for. He was not fighting for white supremacy. He was not fighting to trash other people. He was fighting for truth and justice. So that if you're putting that flag up out of a deep love that embraces everybody, it's fine. If you're sitting down, if you're stooping the way Brother Colin is, out of a deep love, that's beautiful too. But the crucial thing is to recognize that every flag is under something bigger and grander. For me, it's under the cross. It's under truth and love. When that flag doesn't conform to allowing the suffering to speak, when it doesn't conform to embracing, loving, empathizing with everybody, dissent, critique to bear. And it's not just a matter of kneeling. They could break dance during the song. That's all right with me. What are you break dancing for? We are calling notice to the fact that we don't have enough fair treatment of our black brothers and sisters by whoever, police, teachers, or whatever it is. But if it's just going to be a narrow personal thing, if it's going to be something that doesn't embrace everybody, I'm highly suspicious of it. Now, the fact that it affects our athletes is very important. How come? Because our athletes historically have been disproportionately black when it comes to football and basketball. What is it, 70% of 70% of the NFL? And so they entertain the folk with money. They clash, they bounce up against one another. They last about 7, 10, 15 years, and they bring in a new crew. Basketball the same way. The same way. So when those brothers and sisters, these are brothers and sisters oftentimes from circumstances that are so difficult, if they get a chance at success, they're going to be least likely to want to sacrifice it. So when they are willing to sacrifice, you can rest and be assured that a moral and spiritual awakening is taking place. That's why I actually stand very much with Colin and the others. But I tell them the same thing. I meet with them. I meet with my dear brother Popovich, who's the coach of San Antonio Spurs. We've done things in high school in Texas and what have you. And he's vanilla, brother. But that brother, ooh,
he's on point.
You talking about integrity. And he went to the U.S. Air Force Academy. I mean, I'm not used to being in intense coalition with folk from the U.S. Air Force Academy. I love them, but we don't have a lot of overlap usually. Popovich, whoo, that brother is for real. And it's because he's tied to truth and a love in his own powerful way. And that's the kind of coming together that I think we need.
Miss Regina?
Thank you. My name is Regina Goodwin, and the question is, just wanted to say, my grandmother was taught by E. Franklin Frazier, and she would often talk to me about E. Franklin Frazier.
My God.
But I wanted to say, the question is, with police brutality, when we see some murder of black men and women, and when the whole nation waits for a verdict, and their verdict is not guilty, and very rarely are officers charged in situations like that, sometimes, I'm a great believer in God. We talk about keep on keeping on, and we know what our grandparents told us, but what do you say to folks when you ever get to the point where you feel like you don't know what to tell young folks or old folks after the verdict's been rendered? And we've talked about praying, we've talked about acting and being positive forces. What have you found yourself saying sometimes when you're almost out of words?
First, I want to salute you. You're part of that Goodwin family of nobility. I think, oh, yes, indeed. But the second thing is you always want to be honest and candid. And sometimes silence is golden. Sometimes we just got to tell our young people, I don't have any words at the moment. I'm overcome. I'm a human being too. I'm overwhelmed by it. It strikes me as so paralyzing. At the moment, I'm paralyzed. I will break bread with you on Friday afternoon when I think and pray this thing through. But right now, I'm just like you. I'm speechless. And if I said something in my rage and anger, it's something that I would not want to repeat to you because you were in an earlier phase of spiritual formation. We just had to be candid with them, be honest. So on Friday afternoon, I would tell them, well, it's just another moment in which these folk missed. They missed the mark. We've got to fortify ourselves. We can't just stay woke, but stay fortified. We got to be more dedicated. We got to be more devoted to our struggle and not let anything turn us around. Well, you didn't say that on Wednesday. No, I didn't feel that on Wednesday, brother. I was down and out. I went to prayer meeting and I had a little cognac at the same time.
Yes.
Hey.
That's real.
That's how I was feeling.
That's
like
real.
a jazz musician, you got to blow based on your mood.
That's real.
Absolutely.
Question, text question. What advice, Dr. West, do you have for white Americans to make a difference in the fight against racism?
Oh, look at that rich, long, deep history of white brothers and sisters fighting on behalf of black freedom. Who was Miles Horton in his autobiography, The Long Haul? Who was Ann Braden? Oh, who was so many white brothers and sisters. Now, granted, they got a lot of cousins, you know. I mean, I don't want to take this thing too far. But you got a whole wave of white brothers and sisters, and local, regional, state, the Italians and the Irish and the Jewish and on and on and on, who sacrificed much. And I'm not just talking about the John Browns. He was willing to die. Now, John Brown loved black people more than many black people loved themselves. See, so that's an extreme case. Now, he's killing innocent folk. That's wrong. But his love was very deep. So the question becomes, how do you gain access to the witness, the examples of those white brothers and sisters? Because many of them gave their all. You all know Phil Berrigan. You all know Dorothy Day. We can go on and on and on about these white brothers and sisters. Rabbi Heschel and so many, Rabbi Wasco and Lerner and so forth and so on. It's a long history. And so in that sense, they should never feel as if they're reinventing the wheel. Like, oh my God, you know, I'm a white brother and sister at this black thing, and I'm a pioneer. No, you ain't no pioneer. You on the caboose on the train. Whole lot of folk came before you. Just get in there, and you don't get in there in order to be obsessed with what black people think about you. You in there because that's the kind of human being you choose to be. You want to be a person of integrity and honesty and decency. You don't ask for anybody's permission to be there. You're there because you love, and you're there because you want to bear witness.
Thank you. This is our final question.
Hello.
How you doing, my dear sister? Good to see you. Good to see you.
You too. My name is Melissa Lewis. I'm out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, but always representing Jackson, Mississippi, as well as Detroit, Michigan. But my question to you, before I do get into that, Dr. West, Brother West, being a young black woman, I do not know civil rights and social justice movement without you. Thank you for your commitment. Your legacy has and will, excuse me.
Oh, my dear sister. Love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. Love you, though, sister. Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Your legacy has and will continue to shape my life and how I navigate through different spaces. So as a social worker, one of the major issues I see in the black community, in our community, is seeking mental health care. How can we work to destigmatize mental illness among our people and also increase access?
Oh, I salute you. I salute you. I salute you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here again, my dear sister, the history is very important. Towering figures like Richard Wright and Ralph Ellison tried to form that Lafarge Clinic based on Carl Rogers and others in Harlem. For what? Mental health of black people, you see. Not always reducible just to either church or religion. The open-minded people in church and religion would be open, but many would not. That's all right. There's a rich history. Richard Wright thought this was one of the most important things he ever did. Ellison, too. In light of that history, how do you make it more visible? How do you make it more potent? How do you make it more vital and vibrant so it becomes more and more central in the lives of black people? So many of us who are in need of it, you see. And of course, financial issues, the money, but also being prepared. Having the arguments in place in terms of this is the way this works. Look at its fruits. Look at what it's born, you see. And I think one of the wonderful things about this legacy of Beers and the Others is that you've got some folk who are going to go down fighting with you of all colors, because every person is precious, whatever mental challenges they have, and that constitutes wind at all of our backs. Thank you so very much, though. You stay strong now. You stay strong. Absolutely.
What an amazing treat we have had this afternoon with our dear brother and friend, Dr. Cornel West. Please stand to your feet.
God. Oh, I tell you.
When I was growing up in the Baptist church,
In the Baptist church.
when we heard something like this, we would say, the old saints would say, "Did not our hearts burn within?" And that is a saying of the power that has come forth from this man, the wisdom that has come forth from this vessel. And I'm so elated and just incredibly blessed to stand here with you. Reggie?
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. West. We were asked to sum up, and I don't know how we're going to do this, sum up some of what you said. But there are 4 words that come to mind: love, sacrifice, service, and stay woke.
That's right. That's right. That's it, brother. Thank you, brother.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Before you all leave, we have a few announcements. Before we go, I need a drum roll to announce the big winners from our Trailhead experience. Drum roll, please. We actually have a real one, but that's okay. Thank you. We're going to place our winners' names on the screens. Congratulations. You can pick up your prizes at the registration table. Also, this is big. The centerpieces on your table, you may take them, but listen very carefully. MHAO is a nonprofit, so we need those lights up under there, okay? So don't take those lights. We need them for 2018, so leave the lights here. Do not take the one on my table because it's mine. They already told me. So we also want to let you know, here are the dates for the 2018 Symposium. September the 27th through the 28th, right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you all so much.